The spring rains had turned the trail into a treacherous maze of mud and water, and Adelaide Prescott had been foolish enough to think her mare could pick a safe path through it all. One moment, she was guiding her horse around what looked like solid ground, and the next, the earth beneath her gave way like a trapdoor opening straight to hell. She hit the mud with such force that the breath left her lungs, and before she could scramble for purchase, she sank waist deep into the thick, sucking mire that held her as firmly as iron shackles. It was April of 1878, and Adelaide had been traveling alone from her father's ranch outside Independence, California, heading toward the neighboring property to deliver medicine for their foreman's sick wife. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still crowned with winter snow, while the valley floor had transformed into a patchwork of green meadows and deceptive mud pits from the heavy spring runoff. Her mare had bolted the instant Adelaide fell, leaving her stranded on this deserted trail with the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Adelaide twisted and pulled, trying to free herself, but every movement only seemed to drag her deeper into the cold, thick mud. Panic clawed at her throat as she realized the mud was now creeping up past her waist, reaching toward her ribs. She had heard stories of cattle getting stuck in mud like this, how they would struggle until exhaustion took them, how sometimes they would sink so deep that even a team of horses couldn't pull them free. Her heart hammered against her ribcage as she forced herself to stop moving, to conserve her energy and think clearly despite the fear coursing through her veins. The sound of hoofbeats made her head snap up, hope flooding through her chest. A rider was coming down the trail, moving at a steady canter. As he drew closer, she could make out a tall figure on a dark bay horse, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the afternoon sun. She opened her mouth to call out, but her voice came out as barely more than a croak. She tried again, louder this time. "Help, please, I am stuck." The rider's head turned sharply in her direction, and within seconds he had spurred his horse into a gallop. He pulled up short at the edge of the mud pit, swinging down from his saddle with the kind of practiced grace that spoke of years in the saddle. Adelaide could see him clearly now as he approached on foot, testing each step before committing his weight. He was probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was tanned and weathered from long days under the sun, with strong features that might have been carved from the granite of the nearby mountains. "Do not move," he said, his voice deep and steady. "The more you struggle, the deeper you will sink." "I figured that out already," Adelaide replied, trying to keep the tremor of fear from her voice. "Can you get me out?" "That is what I intend to do, miss." He circled the mud pit, studying it from different angles, then returned to his horse and pulled a coiled rope from his saddle. "My name is Isaac Dalton. I work on the Morrison Ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Adelaide Prescott," she managed, watching as he fashioned a loop in the rope. "My father owns the Prescott Ranch east of Independence." Isaac nodded, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I have heard of your father. He has a good reputation." He moved closer to the edge of the mud, playing out the rope. "I am going to toss this to you. When you catch it, put it under your arms and hold on tight. Do not try to help by kicking or pulling. Just let me do the work." "Understand," Adelaide nodded, and he threw the loop. It fell perfectly around her shoulders, and she quickly worked it down under her arms, gripping the rope with both hands. The mud had soaked through her dress and chemise, the cold seeping into her bones, and her fingers felt clumsy as she secured her hold. Isaac moved back toward solid ground, wrapping the rope around his hands. "Ready?" "Yes," he pulled, and Adelaide felt the rope tighten around her ribs. The mud resisted, making obscene sucking sounds as it fought to keep its prize. Isaac's muscles strained under his worn cotton shirt, his boots digging into the earth as he hauled on the rope with steady, powerful pulls. For a terrifying moment, Adelaide thought she would be pulled in half, torn between the rope and the mud's relentless grip. Then suddenly, she felt herself rise an inch, then another. "That is it," Isaac grunted, continuing to pull hand over hand. "Come on." The mud released her with a wet, slurping sound that would have been comical under different circumstances. Adelaide gasped as she came free, and Isaac continued pulling until she was clear of the worst of it, lying on slightly firmer ground near the edge of the pit. He dropped the rope and hurried to her side, dropping to one knee beside her. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her arms, checking for injuries with a gentle efficiency that surprised her. "I think I am all right," Adelaide said, though her whole body was shaking now from cold and shock and relief. Just cold and covered in mud. Isaac looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Then he made a decision. Without warning, he slid one arm under her knees and the other around her back, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Adelaide let out a startled sound, instinctively wrapping her arms around his neck as he straightened. "What are you doing?" "Getting you to dry ground properly," he said, carrying her away from the mud pit toward a stretch of grass and wildflowers that covered a gentle slope. "You are shaking like a leaf, and that mud is cold enough to make you sick if we do not get you warmed up." He was right about the shaking, and Adelaide found she did not have the energy to argue. Instead, she let herself lean against his solid chest, feeling the warmth of his body through his shirt. He smelled of horses and leather and something else, something clean like soap and fresh air. When they reached the dry ground, he set her down carefully on a sun-warmed boulder, then immediately shrugged out of his leather vest and draped it around her shoulders. "My horse bolted," Adelaide explained, her teeth chattering slightly. "She threw me right into that mud and ran off." "Horses have more sense than people sometimes," Isaac said, though his tone was not unkind. He returned to his bay and retrieved a canteen, bringing it back to her. "Drink this. It will help." The water was cool and clean, and Adelaide drank gratefully, feeling some of the panic finally begin to ebb away. Isaac crouched in front of her, his expression serious as he studied her face. "That was dangerous, what you were doing out here alone," he said quietly. "These trails are treacherous after the spring rains. You could have died in that mud." "I know that now," Adelaide replied, a flash of irritation cutting through her gratitude. "I did not exactly plan to fall into it. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. I suppose not." "What were you doing out here anyway?" She explained about the medicine, about the foreman's sick wife, and as she spoke, Isaac's expression softened slightly. When she finished, he nodded and stood. "We should get you home before dark. Can you ride?" Adelaide looked down at herself. She was covered in mud from the waist down, her skirts heavy and sodden, but she nodded. "I think so." "Good, you will ride with me. We can send someone back for your horse later." She probably headed home already anyway. He helped her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow as she swayed slightly. The mud made her skirts impossibly heavy, and when she tried to take a step, she nearly stumbled. Isaac caught her immediately, his strong hands gripping her waist to keep her upright. "Sorry," Adelaide murmured, embarrassed by her own weakness. "Nothing to apologize for," he said. "You have been through an ordeal." He led her to his bay, a handsome gelding with intelligent eyes, and before Adelaide could figure out how she was supposed to mount in her current state, Isaac simply picked her up again and lifted her into the saddle. She settled herself as best she could, and then Isaac swung up behind her, his arms coming around either side of her to grasp the reins. Adelaide stiffened slightly at the intimacy of the position, but Isaac seemed entirely focused on guiding his horse back onto the trail. "Relax," he said softly, close to her ear. "I have got you. You will not fall." There was something about his voice, steady and confident, that made Adelaide believe him. She let herself lean back slightly against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him at her back. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them strangely soothing after the terror of the mud pit. "Thank you," Adelaide said finally, breaking the quiet, "for pulling me out, for not leaving me there." "I would never leave someone in need," Isaac replied. "That is not how I was raised. Still, you could have just thrown me the rope and left me to make my own way. Instead, you carried me to safety." She felt rather than saw his shrug. Seemed like the right thing to do. They fell silent again, and Adelaide found herself acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. The gentle pressure of his chest against her back, the brush of his arms against hers, as he managed the reins, the solid strength of his thighs alongside hers. It was improper, riding like this with a man she had just met, but there was something about Isaac Dalton that made her feel safe rather than threatened. He had handled her with respect and care, had not taken advantage of her vulnerable position, had treated her like a person rather than just a female body to be leered at or dismissed. "How long have you worked at the Morrison Ranch?" she asked, curious about this man who had saved her life. "About 3 years now. I came west from Missouri looking for work and a fresh start. Mr. Morrison took me on as a hand and I worked my way up to foreman about a year ago." "You are the foreman." Adelaide twisted slightly to look at him, surprised. He seemed young for such a position of responsibility. Isaac nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Is that so hard to believe?" "No, you seem quite young." "I am 26, he said, "and I work hard. Mr. Morrison rewards merit, not just age." "That is good," Adelaide said sincerely. "My father is the same way. He says a man proves his worth through his actions, not through the years he has lived." "Your father sounds like a wise man." The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The trail wound through rolling hills covered in spring grass, and in the distance, Adelaide could see the first signs of the Prescott Ranch, the fence lines that marked the boundaries of her father's land. She felt a strange reluctance as they drew closer to home, knowing that this unexpected interlude with Isaac Dalton would soon come to an end. "That is our ranch house," she said, pointing to the whitewashed building that stood on a rise overlooking the valley. Smoke curled from the chimney, and she could see lanterns being lit in the windows as the household prepared for evening. Isaac guided his horse through the main gate and up the long drive to the house. Before they had even reached the hitching post, the front door flew open and Adelaide's father emerged, his face lined with worry. Thomas Prescott was a tall man in his early 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and keen blue eyes that missed very little. "Adelaide." He hurried down the steps, his gaze taking in her mud-covered state and the stranger who held her. "What happened? Your horse came back without you an hour ago. I was about to organize a search party." Isaac reined in his horse and dismounted, then reached up to help Adelaide down. Her father was at her side in an instant, gripping her shoulders as he looked her over. "I am all right, Pa," Adelaide assured him. "I got stuck in the mud on the trail to the Henderson place. Mr. Dalton here pulled me free and brought me home." Thomas Prescott turned his attention to Isaac, his expression shifting from worry to assessment. "You saved my daughter." "I helped her, sir," Isaac said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Thomas said firmly. He extended his hand and Isaac shook it. "Thomas Prescott." "I am in your debt, Mr. Dalton." "Isaac Dalton, sir, and there is no debt. I'm just glad I came along when I did." Adelaide's mother, Elizabeth, appeared on the porch, her hand flying to her mouth when she saw the state of her daughter. "Adelaide, oh my dear child, come inside at once." "You must be frozen. Go with your mother," Thomas said, giving Adelaide a gentle push toward the house. "Get cleaned up and warm. I want to speak with Mr. Dalton for a moment." Adelaide hesitated, glancing at Isaac, but he gave her a small nod of encouragement. She gathered her muddy skirts and made her way up the steps, where her mother immediately wrapped an arm around her and ushered her inside. Adelaide looked back once to see her father and Isaac standing together, speaking in low tones, before the door closed and her mother began fussing over her in earnest. An hour later, Adelaide had bathed and changed into clean clothes, her long auburn hair still damp but neatly braided down her back. She found her parents in the parlor, along with Isaac, who was sitting somewhat awkwardly in one of the upholstered chairs with a cup of coffee in his hands. He had clearly been convinced to stay for supper, and he stood immediately when Adelaide entered the room. "There you are," her mother said warmly. "Feeling better, dear?" "Much better," Adelaide confirmed, taking a seat on the sofa. Her father was watching Isaac with an expression she could not quite read, while Isaac himself seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. "I have been telling Mr. Dalton that we would like to properly thank him for his actions today," Thomas said. "A man who saves my daughter's life deserves more than just words of gratitude." Sir, I really do not need any thanks, Isaac protested. I was just doing what was right. Nevertheless, I would like to offer you a reward. Name your price, Mr. Dalton. Isaac shook his head firmly. I cannot take money for helping someone in need. That would not be right. Adelaide watched this exchange with interest, noting the stubborn set of Isaac's jaw and the equally stubborn look in her father's eyes. These were two men who shared similar principles, and she suspected that neither would give in easily. If not money, then something else, Thomas pressed. You must allow me to do something. If you insist, sir, then simply knowing that Miss Prescott is safe and well is reward enough for me. Thomas studied Isaac for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You are a man of integrity, Mr. Dalton. That is rare in this world. At least stay for supper. My wife has prepared enough to feed an army, and it would please us to share our table with you. Isaac glanced at Adelaide, and something passed between them, some unspoken question and answer. I would be honored, he said finally. Supper was a lively affair, with Adelaide's two younger brothers, Matthew and James, bombarding Isaac with questions about ranch work and horses and life in Missouri. Isaac answered patiently, his natural reserve gradually melting as he warmed to the enthusiastic boys. Adelaide found herself watching him more than she probably should, noticing the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way his large hands handled his silverware with surprising grace, the way he listened attentively when someone spoke, as if their words truly mattered to him. Adelaide is quite skilled with horses herself, Elizabeth was saying, drawing Adelaide's attention back to the conversation. She has been riding since she was 3 years old. That does not surprise me, Isaac said, glancing at Adelaide. She seemed very comfortable in the saddle, even covered in mud and exhausted. Not comfortable enough to avoid the mud pit in the first place, Adelaide said wryly, and Isaac's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Even the most experienced riders can be caught off guard by dangerous terrain, he said. There is no shame in it. After supper, Thomas invited Isaac to see the ranch's breeding stock, and Adelaide found herself walking alongside them as they made their way to the barns. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of hay and horses and spring flowers. Isaac examined the horses with a knowledgeable eye, asking intelligent questions about bloodlines and training methods that clearly impressed Thomas. You have a good operation here, Isaac said as they finished the tour. These horses are some of the finest I have seen in California. High praise from a Morrison foreman, Thomas said with satisfaction. You should come by more often, Mr. Dalton. I am always happy to talk horses with someone who knows his business. I would like that, sir. Thomas glanced between Isaac and Adelaide, a thoughtful look crossing his face. In fact, why do not you join us for supper again, say this coming Sunday? We always have a big meal after church, and we would be pleased to have you. Adelaide felt her heart skip slightly at the invitation. Isaac hesitated, his gaze finding hers in the gathering darkness. I would not want to impose, he said carefully. It is no imposition, Thomas assured him. Any friend of Adelaide's is welcome at our table. Then I accept, Isaac said. Thank you for your hospitality. He took his leave shortly after, swinging into his saddle with easy grace. Adelaide walked him to the gate, feeling suddenly shy now that they were alone again. Thank you again, she said, for everything today. You have already thanked me several times, Isaac pointed out, but his tone was gentle. There is no need to keep doing so. I suppose I just want you to know how much it meant, Adelaide said. You did not have to go to such lengths to help me, but you did. That says a lot about who you are. Isaac was quiet for a moment, looking down at her from his horse. I will see you on Sunday, Miss Prescott. Adelaide, she corrected. Please, just Adelaide. Adelaide, he repeated, and the way he said her name made something warm unfurl in her chest. I will see you on Sunday. She watched him ride away until his form disappeared into the darkness, then stood there a moment longer, listening to the fading sound of hoofbeats. When she finally turned back to the house, she found her mother waiting on the porch, a knowing smile on her face. He seems like a good man, Elizabeth said as Adelaide climbed the steps. He is, Adelaide agreed, and felt herself blushing without quite knowing why. The days until Sunday seemed to pass with agonizing slowness. Adelaide found herself thinking about Isaac at odd moments, remembering the feel of his arms around her as they rode, the steady confidence of his voice, the way he had treated her with such careful respect. She told herself she was being foolish, that she barely knew this man, but her heart did not seem interested in listening to logic. Sunday dawned bright and clear, and Adelaide took extra care with her appearance, choosing a dress of pale blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Her mother said nothing, but the small smile that played at her lips suggested she noticed and understood. After the church service in Independence, they returned home to find Isaac already waiting, sitting on the porch steps with his hat in his hands. Mr. Dalton. Thomas called out warmly as they dismounted from the wagon. Right on time. Come in, come in. The meal was another success, with Isaac fitting into the family dynamic as if he had always been there. He talked with her brothers about their schoolwork, complimented her mother's cooking, and engaged her father in a spirited debate about the best methods for breaking horses. Adelaide mostly listened, content to watch him interact with her family, noting how naturally kind he was, how he never talked down to anyone despite his own obvious intelligence and competence. After the meal, Adelaide's father suggested she show Isaac the rest of the property, and she suspected the suggestion was less about Isaac seeing the land and more about giving them time alone together. They walked through the pastures where spring foals gamboled beside their mothers and down to the creek that marked the western boundary of the Prescott land. "Your family is wonderful," Isaac said as they stood on the creek bank, watching the water flow past. "You are very fortunate." "I know," Adelaide said softly. "I do not take it for granted." She paused, then asked, "What about your family? You said you came from Missouri." A shadow crossed Isaac's face. "My parents died when I was 17, cholera. I had a younger sister, but she passed the same year. After that, there was nothing keeping me in Missouri, so I headed west." "I am so sorry," Adelaide said, her heart aching for him. "That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Isaac said, though his voice carried the weight of old grief. "I have made peace with it." Adelaide reached out without thinking, laying her hand on his arm. "Still, losing everyone you love like that, I cannot imagine." Isaac looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "You are very kind, Adelaide." "I am just being honest," she said, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. "You saved my life, Isaac. The least I can do is offer you some small measure of compassion." He turned to face her fully, and Adelaide found herself caught in the intensity of his gaze. "You are unlike any woman I have ever met," he said quietly. "You are strong and capable and genuine. There is no artifice in you, no pretense." "Is that a good thing?" Adelaide asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is a very good thing," Isaac said. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and brushed a strand of hair back from her face. His fingers were warm against her cheek, calloused from years of ranch work but surprisingly gentle. "I have not been able to stop thinking about you since last Tuesday. I know I have no right to say such things, but I cannot seem to help myself." Adelaide's breath caught in her throat. "You have been in my thoughts as well," she admitted. "Constantly." Isaac's eyes searched hers, and she saw hope and uncertainty warring in their gray depths. "I would like to call on you properly if your father would permit it. I know I am just a ranch foreman with little to offer, but I am hardworking and honest, and I would treat you with the respect you deserve." "You have a great deal to offer," Adelaide said firmly. "And yes, I would like that very much." The smile that broke across Isaac's face transformed it completely, chasing away the shadows and revealing a warmth that made Adelaide's heart flutter. He took her hand in his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Then I will speak with your father today before I leave." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Adelaide felt as though she were floating. When Isaac approached her father to ask permission to court her, Thomas gave his blessing readily, clearly pleased with the match. Elizabeth hugged Adelaide afterward, whispering that she had known from the moment she saw them together that something special was growing between them. Over the following weeks, Isaac became a regular presence at the Prescott Ranch. He would ride over after his work was done at the Morrison place, spending his evenings with Adelaide and her family. They would walk together in the twilight, talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the parents he had loved and lost, about his journey west and the hardships he had endured along the way. Adelaide shared her own hopes and fears, her love for the land and the horses, her desire to build something meaningful with her life. The more time she spent with Isaac, the deeper Adelaide fell in love with him. He was everything she had never known she wanted. Strong but gentle, confident but humble, hardworking but never too busy to listen when she needed to talk. He made her laugh with his dry sense of humor, challenged her thinking with his thoughtful questions, and treated her like an equal partner rather than a delicate ornament to be admired from a distance. One evening in early June, as they sat together on the porch swing watching the sun set over the mountains, Isaac took her hand in his. "Adelaide," he said, his voice serious. "We have been courting for almost 2 months now, and I think you know how I feel about you. But I need to say it plainly so there is no misunderstanding." He turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your fierce spirit. I love the way you care for your family, the way you handle horses with such skill and respect, the way you always speak your mind even when it might be easier to stay silent. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." Adelaide felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too, Isaac. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you pulled me from that mud and carried me to safety. You were my hero that day, and you have been my hero every day since." Isaac reached up to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears that had spilled onto her cheeks. "I do not have much to offer you right now, just my heart and my promise that I will work hard to give you the life you deserve. You are all I need," Adelaide said fiercely. "I do not care about money or grand houses, I just want to be with you." "Then marry me," Isaac said. "Be my wife, Adelaide Prescott. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "Yes," Adelaide breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Adelaide felt her whole world shift and settle into place. This was where she belonged, in the arms of this good man who had saved her life and won her heart. They announced their engagement the next day, to the delight of both families. Thomas shook Isaac's hand warmly and welcomed him officially into the family, while Elizabeth cried happy tears and immediately began planning the wedding. Even Isaac's employer, Mr. Morrison, was pleased when he heard the news, offering to give Isaac a bonus and a few days off for the wedding and a brief honeymoon. The wedding was planned for late August, giving them a few months to prepare. Adelaide threw herself into the preparations with her mother's help, sewing her wedding dress by hand and making plans for their future life together. Isaac had been saving money for years, and combined with a loan from the bank and some help from Thomas, he was able to purchase a small piece of land adjacent to the Prescott Ranch. It was not much, just 50 acres with a modest house and a barn that needed repairs, but it was theirs, a foundation on which they could build their future. In the evenings, after his work was done, Isaac would come over and they would ride out to their new property together, making plans for how they would fix up the house and expand the barn, discussing what crops they might grow and how many horses they could eventually support. Adelaide loved these evenings, loved the way Isaac valued her opinions and included her in every decision, loved the way they worked as a team rather than as master and subordinate. "I was thinking we could add a room here," Adelaide said one evening, standing in what would be their bedroom. "For children, eventually." Isaac came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "How many children do you want?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "I do not know. Several, I think. I loved growing up with brothers, and I would like our children to have siblings. What about you?" "I always wanted a big family," Isaac admitted. After I lost my parents and sister, I dreamed of someday having a house full of children and love and laughter. A family of my own that death could not steal away. Adelaide turned in his arms, seeing the vulnerability in his face. We will have that, she promised. We will fill this house with children and love, and we will build something beautiful together. I believe you, Isaac said, and kissed her forehead. With you by my side, I believe anything is possible. The days passed in a blur of preparations and anticipation. Adelaide's mother taught her the finer points of running a household, while her father gave her advice about managing money and dealing with the challenges that came with ranch life. Isaac spent his spare time working on their new house, repairing the roof and replacing rotten floorboards, painting walls and building furniture. Adelaide helped whenever she could, finding joy in the physical labor of creating their home together. Finally, on a warm August day with the sky a brilliant blue overhead, Adelaide and Isaac were married in the small church in Independence. Adelaide wore her handmade dress of white lace, with wildflowers woven into her auburn hair, and Isaac stood at the altar in his best suit looking both nervous and radiantly happy. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Isaac kissed her for the first time as her husband, Adelaide felt a completeness she had never known before, as if a piece of her soul that had been missing had finally clicked into place. The celebration that followed was joyous, with seemingly half the county turning out to wish them well. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and through it all, Isaac never left Adelaide's side. He held her hand, danced with her, introduced her proudly as his wife to everyone they met. Adelaide basked in his attention, in the solid warmth of his presence, in the knowledge that this man was now her partner for life. As evening fell, they said their goodbyes and rode out to their new home together. Isaac carried Adelaide over the threshold, both of them laughing as he nearly tripped on the doorframe, and then they were alone together for the first time as husband and wife. The house was small and simple, but Adelaide had never seen anything more beautiful. Isaac had strung lanterns around the main room, and their soft glow illuminated the furniture he had built, the curtains she had sewn, all the small touches that made this place uniquely theirs. "Welcome home, Mrs. Dalton," Isaac said softly, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Dalton," Adelaide repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Isaac said, pulling her close. "So do I." That night, as they lay together in their new bed, Adelaide reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. If her horse had not thrown her into that mud pit, if Isaac had not happened to ride by at exactly the right moment, if he had not been the kind of man who would stop to help a stranger in need, they might never have met at all. It seemed like fate, like something that was always meant to be, and Adelaide sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force in the universe had conspired to bring them together. The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. The small ranch required constant work, and money was tight as they tried to establish themselves. There were times when Adelaide wondered if they had taken on too much too soon, times when the sheer exhaustion of dawn to dusk labor made her question their choices. But then Isaac would take her in his arms at the end of a long day, would hold her close and remind her that they were building something together, that every hardship was just another step toward their dream, and she would find her resolve renewed. They worked side by side, equal partners in every sense. Adelaide proved herself as capable as any man when it came to ranch work, able to rope and brand and break horses with skill that earned respect from even the most hardened cowboys. Isaac never tried to restrict her or tell her that certain work was too dangerous or unsuitable for a woman. He treated her as his partner, valuing her opinions and relying on her strength, just as she relied on his. By their first anniversary, they had made significant progress. The ranch was beginning to turn a small profit, their herd of horses was growing, and they had added several improvements to the property. More importantly, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac the news on the evening of their anniversary, and the joy on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Adelaide asked, though she could already see the answer in his eyes. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Isaac said, pulling her into a fierce embrace. You have given me everything, Adelaide. A home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. I love you so much. I love you too, Adelaide said, her own eyes filling with tears. We are going to be parents, Isaac. We are going to have the family you always dreamed of. The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical demands of ranch work became increasingly difficult. But Isaac was there every step of the way, taking on extra work so she could rest, bringing her tea and crackers in the morning when the nausea was worst, rubbing her aching feet in the evenings. He treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worried that she was doing too much, and Adelaide had to keep reminding him that pregnancy was not an illness. Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. She told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from lifting a saddle. I am not helpless, Isaac. I know you are not, he said. I just do not want anything to happen to you or the baby. You are both so precious to me. His concern was touching, even when it was frustrating, and Adelaide learned to accept his help with grace. As her due date approached, her mother came to stay with them, and Adelaide was grateful for her presence and experience. When the labor pains finally started on a cold February morning, Adelaide was frightened but ready, and Isaac stayed with her through the whole ordeal, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement even when she snapped at him to be quiet. Their son was born just after dawn, a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that proclaimed his arrival to the world. Isaac cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his newborn son with wonder and awe. He is perfect, Isaac whispered. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Adelaide asked, exhausted but happy as she watched her husband cradle their child. I was thinking we could name him Thomas, Isaac said, after your father if that is all right with you. He has been so good to us and I would like to honor him. Thomas Dalton, Adelaide said, testing the name. I think that is perfect. Little Thomas thrived, growing strong and healthy despite the harsh winter. Adelaide marveled at how much her life had changed in less than 2 years. She had gone from a single woman living with her parents to a wife and mother with her own home and family, and every bit of it was more wonderful than she could have imagined. Isaac was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, singing to him and talking to him and looking at him as if he were the greatest miracle in creation. As Thomas grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of their horses, and they began to build a reputation throughout the region. By the time Thomas was 3, they had expanded their operation significantly, hiring a couple of ranch hands and purchasing adjacent land. Adelaide's father was proud of what they had accomplished, often telling anyone who would listen about his daughter and son-in-law, who had built something from nothing through sheer hard work and determination. When Thomas was 4, Adelaide gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Adelaide's mother. She had her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes, and Isaac doted on her even more than he had on Thomas, if that was possible. Watching him with their children, seeing the gentle patience and unconditional love he showed them every day, Adelaide fell in love with him all over again. He was everything she had hoped for and more, a partner, a friend, a lover, and a father all rolled into one remarkable man. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. 2 more children joined the family, another son named William and then a daughter named Grace. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the operation grew along with it. What had started as a small 50-acre property with a few horses had become one of the most successful ranches in the valley, known for producing some of the finest horses in California. Through it all, Adelaide and Isaac remained as devoted to each other as they had been in the beginning. They still stole moments alone when they could, still held hands when they walked, still looked at each other with the same love and wonder that had characterized those early days of courtship. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had faced hardships and setbacks and challenges, but they had faced them together, and that made all the difference. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard before them, Isaac took Adelaide's hand in his. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. "The day we met, all the time," Adelaide admitted. "I think about how different my life would be if I had not fallen into that mud, if you had not come along when you did." "I think about it too," Isaac said, "about how a single moment can change everything. How fate or chance or whatever you want to call it can bring two people together who are meant to be." "Do you believe we were meant to be?" Adelaide asked, curious. "Absolutely," Isaac said without hesitation. "From the moment I saw you stuck in that mud, fighting and refusing to give up, I knew there was something special about you. And when I pulled you free and carried you to dry ground, when I held you in my arms for the first time, something in my soul recognized you. Like I had been searching my whole life without knowing it, and suddenly I had found what I was looking for." Adelaide felt tears sting her eyes. After all these years, after everything they had been through together, Isaac still had the power to move her with his words. "I felt it too," she said softly. "That sense of recognition, of rightness. I knew I could trust you, even though you were a stranger. My heart knew you before my mind did." Isaac raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that mud pit, for the chance to save you, to meet you, to love you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Adelaide Dalton." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Adelaide replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Thomas was teaching Elizabeth how to rope the fence post, while William and Grace chased each other through the grass, their laughter ringing out clear and bright in the evening air. This was everything she had ever wanted, everything she had never dared to dream of. A loving husband who respected and cherished her, healthy children who filled their home with joy and noise, a successful ranch they had built together with their own hands, and a future that stretched out before them full of promise and possibility. It had all started with a foolish mistake, with a horse that threw her and mud that trapped her and a cowboy who stopped to help. But what had started as a disaster had become the greatest blessing of her life. Adelaide thought about the woman she had been that April day in 1878, young and naive and thinking she knew what life had in store for her. She could never have imagined then how much her world was about to change, how that handsome cowboy with the steady gray eyes would become the center of her universe, how his strength would become her strength, and his dreams would become intertwined with her own. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, sensing her reflective mood. "Just about how lucky I am," Adelaide said, "how much I love our life together." "We have been blessed," Isaac agreed, "more than we probably deserve." "We have worked hard for what we have," Adelaide said firmly. "We have earned it through sweat and sacrifice and never giving up, even when things were difficult." "True," Isaac conceded, "but we also had each other. That made all the difference." Adelaide could not argue with that. They had always been stronger together than they ever could have been apart. Isaac had pushed her to be braver and more confident, while she had taught him to open his heart again after the losses he had suffered. They had balanced each other, complemented each other, made each other better versions of themselves. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they called the children inside for supper. The house filled with the cheerful chaos of family life, with children talking over each other and dishes clattering and the warm smell of bread and stew filling the air. After the meal, Adelaide and Isaac worked together to get the children ready for bed, reading them stories and tucking them in with kisses and prayers. When the house was finally quiet, they retreated to their own room, the space that had been theirs alone since the beginning. Isaac pulled Adelaide into his arms, and they stood there for a long moment, just holding each other in the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other so well that words were not always necessary. "I love you," Isaac said finally, pulling back to look at her face. "I do not say it enough, but I love you more than anything in this world. You show me every day," Adelaide said, reaching up to touch his face. "In the way you look at me, the way you support me, the way you honor our partnership. I never doubt your love, Isaac, not for a moment." "Good," he said, and kissed her with the kind of passion that had not diminished over their years together. "Because I intend to keep showing you for the rest of our lives." They made love that night with the tenderness and familiarity of long practice, knowing exactly how to please each other, taking their time to savor every touch and kiss. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Adelaide felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was happiness, real and deep and lasting. Not the fairy tale kind where everything was always perfect, but the genuine kind that came from building a life with someone, from weathering storms and celebrating triumphs and choosing each other over and over again, day after day, year after year. The ranch continued to thrive over the following decade. Their children grew healthy and strong, each developing their own unique personalities and talents. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses, just like his parents, and spent every spare moment in the stables learning everything Isaac could teach him. Elizabeth inherited her mother's fierce independence and determination, never backing down from a challenge and insisting on being treated as an equal to her brothers. William was the quiet scholar of the family, more interested in books and learning than ranch work, though he did his share without complaint. And little Grace was the heart of the family, with a sunny disposition and a gift for bringing out the best in everyone around her. Adelaide and Isaac supported each of their children's interests, never trying to force them into predetermined roles or expectations. They encouraged William's love of learning even as they taught Thomas and Elizabeth the skills needed to run the ranch. They made sure Grace knew she was just as valued and important as her siblings, that her kindness and compassion were strengths rather than weaknesses. As the years passed, Adelaide's parents grew older, and Thomas Prescott eventually turned over the management of his ranch to his sons, Matthew and James. But he remained a constant presence in Adelaide and Isaac's lives, a loving grandfather to their children and a trusted advisor when they needed counsel. Elizabeth Prescott doted on her grandchildren, often coming to stay for weeks at a time to help Adelaide with the household and to spend time with the little ones. When Adelaide was 38, her father passed away peacefully in his sleep. The loss hit her hard, and for weeks she struggled with her grief, unable to find her footing in a world without her father's steady presence. Isaac held her through the dark nights when she cried, listened patiently when she needed to talk about memories of her father, and took on extra work so she could have time to process her loss. His support was unwavering, and gradually Adelaide found her way back to herself, carrying her father's memory in her heart, but able to move forward with her life. "He was so proud of you," Isaac told her one evening as they stood at Thomas Prescott's grave. "Of everything you accomplished, of the woman you became. He told me once that you exceeded every hope he ever had for you." "He said that?" Adelaide asked, tears streaming down her face. "He did. The day I asked permission to court you. He said you were the brightest light in his life, and that any man lucky enough to win your heart would be blessed beyond measure. He was right." Adelaide leaned into Isaac's embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I miss him so much, I know you do, and that is all right. Missing him means he mattered, that he made a difference in your life. Carry that with you, Adelaide. Let it be a source of comfort rather than just pain." Adelaide took his words to heart, and slowly the sharp edge of grief softened into something more manageable, a gentle ache rather than a consuming agony. She found she could remember her father with smiles as well as tears, could celebrate his life rather than just mourning his death. And through it all, Isaac was there, patient and understanding and loving, never pressuring her to heal faster than she was ready, but always ready to catch her when she stumbled. By the time Adelaide turned 45, all 4 of their children had grown into remarkable young adults. Thomas, at 22, had become Isaac's right hand in running the ranch, showing the same instinctive understanding of horses and land management that had made his parents so successful. Elizabeth, at 18, had shocked everyone by announcing her intention to attend the new teachers' college that had opened in Sacramento, determined to get an education and make her own way in the world before settling down. William had earned a scholarship to study at the University of California, pursuing his dream of becoming a lawyer. And Grace, at 15, was still at home but already showing signs of the remarkable woman she would become. Adelaide and Isaac watched their children spread their wings with a mixture of pride and melancholy. The house that had been so full of noise and activity for so many years was growing quieter, and there were moments when Adelaide missed the chaos of raising young children. But there was also something wonderful about this new phase of life, about having time alone with Isaac again, about being able to focus on each other without the constant demands of parenting pulling them in different directions. "We did well," Isaac said one evening as they sat together on the porch, the same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. "Our children are good people, strong and kind and capable. We should be proud." "I am proud," Adelaide said, "of them and of us. We gave them roots and wings, just like we always wanted to." "Your father would be proud too," Isaac said, squeezing her hand. "Of all of it." Adelaide smiled, thinking of her father and how much she still missed him even after all these years, but Isaac was right. Thomas Prescott would have been immensely proud of his grandchildren, of the ranch Adelaide and Isaac had built, of the life they had created together. When Thomas Jr. was 25, he married a lovely young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and Adelaide found herself becoming a grandmother for the first time just a year later. Holding her grandson in her arms, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, Adelaide felt the circle of life come full around. This was what it was all about, she realized. Building something that would outlast you, creating a legacy of love and family that would continue long after you were gone. "He looks like you," Isaac said softly, looking over her shoulder at the sleeping baby. "Like you did when our Thomas was born." "He looks like all of us," Adelaide said. "Past and present and future, all mixed together in one perfect little person." More grandchildren followed over the years. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children in total, while Elizabeth eventually married a fellow teacher and had 2 children of her own. William married a brilliant woman he met at university and settled in San Francisco, where he built a successful law practice and raised 4 children. Only Grace remained single longer, focused on helping run the ranch and pursuing her passion for breeding champion horses. Adelaide and Isaac grew older together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love for each other never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year, tempered by time and hardship into something unbreakable. They still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, still looked at each other with the same wonder and affection that had characterized those early days of their courtship. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a huge celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from miles around to help them commemorate 4 decades of marriage. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and more love than Adelaide could have ever imagined when she was a young woman falling into the mud all those years ago. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Isaac led Adelaide away from the crowd to a quiet spot by the creek. It was the same place where he had first told her he loved her, where he had asked her to marry him all those years ago. "Do you remember this place?" Isaac asked, pulling her close. "Of course I do," Adelaide said. "How could I forget? This is where everything began." "This is where I realized I could not live without you," Isaac said. "Where I knew that I would do whatever it took to make you mine. Best decision I ever made." "Best decision we both made," Adelaide corrected. "I chose you just as much as you chose me." "True," Isaac agreed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I got you something, to commemorate 40 years. Adelaide opened the box to find a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a horse. It was beautiful and thoughtful, and tears sprang to her eyes. "Isaac, it is perfect, thank you." "Look at the back," he said softly. She turned the pendant over and found an inscription. "From mud to forever with all my love." Adelaide laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by the sweetness of the gesture and the perfect encapsulation of their story. "I love it. I love you." "I love you too," Isaac said, fastening the necklace around her neck. 40 years and I still cannot believe how lucky I am that you said yes." 40 years, and I still cannot believe how lucky I am that you rode down that trail at exactly the right moment, Adelaide countered. That you stopped to help instead of riding past, that you pulled me free and carried me to safety. I would do it again in a heartbeat, Isaac said. I would live through everything all over again just to end up here in this moment with you. They stood there by the creek as the stars came out overhead, holding each other the way they had held each other thousands of times before, the way they would hold each other thousands of times more. Adelaide thought about the long, winding road that had brought them to this moment, about all the joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, ordinary days and extraordinary moments that had made up their life together. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. Every single moment had been worth it for the privilege of building a life with this man who had saved her and loved her and chosen her every single day for 40 years. Come on, Isaac said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. We should get back to the party. Our children will wonder where we went. Let them wonder, Adelaide said with a smile. I am exactly where I want to be. But they did walk back eventually, hand in hand, their fingers intertwined the way they had been since the beginning. Their children and grandchildren greeted them with hugs and kisses, and Adelaide looked around at all the faces she loved, at the family she and Isaac had created together, and felt a gratitude so profound it brought fresh tears to her eyes. This was their legacy. Not just the successful ranch or the fine horses or the land they had accumulated over the years. It was this: love and family and the ties that bound them all together. It was the example they had set for their children about what a real partnership looked like, about how to weather storms together, about choosing love every single day, even when it was hard. It was the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren about hard work and integrity and treating people with respect and kindness. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Adelaide found herself thinking about that young woman who had gotten stuck in the mud so many years ago. She had been frightened and alone, sinking into the cold earth with no idea that her life was about to change forever. She had been saved that day by a cowboy with gray eyes and gentle hands, a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and treated her with kindness and respect. She had fallen in love with that cowboy, had built a life with him that exceeded her wildest dreams. If she could go back in time and talk to that young woman struggling in the mud, Adelaide would tell her not to be afraid. She would tell her that help was coming, that salvation was riding toward her on a dark bay horse. She would tell her that the man who pulled her free would also free her heart, would show her what real love looked like, would be her partner and her friend and her great love for the rest of her life. She would tell her that getting stuck in that mud was the best thing that ever happened to her, even though she could not see it yet. But she could not go back, could only move forward, and that was all right. Because she had lived it all, had experienced every moment of joy and sorrow and everything in between. She had loved and been loved in return, had created a family and a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. She had built something beautiful and lasting with a man who had once been a stranger but who had become the other half of her soul. Adelaide looked at Isaac across the crowd of their children and grandchildren, and their eyes met and held. Even now, after 40 years, there was magic in that look, a connection that transcended words or time or any other barrier. He smiled at her, that special smile that was just for her, and she smiled back, her heart full to overflowing with love and gratitude and joy. They had started in the mud, but they had built a life on solid ground. Together, they had created something that would last forever, a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through everything life threw at them. And Adelaide knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that she would make the same choice again and again and again, for all eternity. The party eventually ended, and the guests departed, leaving Adelaide and Isaac alone in their ranch house surrounded by the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving more slowly now than they once had, but still together, still side by side. Isaac helped Adelaide out of her party dress, his hands as gentle and reverent as they had been on their wedding night, and she helped him with his buttons, her fingers fumbling slightly but still capable. They climbed into bed together, their bed, the one they had shared for 4 decades, and Isaac pulled Adelaide close, her back against his chest, his arm draped protectively over her waist. This was how they slept every night, had slept every night since they were married, and Adelaide could not imagine falling asleep any other way. "Thank you," Isaac whispered in the darkness, his breath warm against her ear. "For what?" Adelaide asked. "For 40 years. For loving me. For building this life with me. For being exactly who you are." "Thank you for the same," Adelaide said, covering his hand with hers. "Thank you for pulling me from the mud. Thank you for carrying me to safety. Thank you for loving me all these years. Always," Isaac promised. "Until my last breath and beyond." Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, grateful tears. She had been given a gift that day in the mud, though she had not known it at the time. She had been given Isaac, and with him, she had been given everything that mattered. Love and partnership, family and purpose, joy and meaning. Everything that made life worth living. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead and the wind whispered through the grass, and the horses moved quietly in their stables. The ranch that Adelaide and Isaac had built together slept peacefully under the California sky, a testament to their hard work and love and devotion. The years continued to pass, bringing new grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Adelaide and Isaac slowed down even more, their bodies aging and weakening, but their spirits remained strong. They spent their days on the porch in rocking chairs, watching the ranch that Thomas Jr. now managed with the same skill and dedication his parents had shown. They told stories to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing down the history of the family and the values that had guided them through life. Adelaide never tired of telling the story of how she and Isaac met, of the mud pit and the rescue, and the instant connection that had sparked between them. The children would listen wide-eyed as she described sinking into the cold mud, as she talked about seeing Isaac ride up on his bay horse like a hero from a storybook. And Isaac would hold her hand and add his own details, about how beautiful she had been even covered in mud, about how he had known immediately that she was special, about how carrying her to dry ground had felt like the most important thing he had ever done. And they lived happily ever after, the youngest children would say when the story ended, and Adelaide would smile and nod. "Yes," she would say, we really did." When Adelaide was 72 and Isaac was 74, they celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary quietly, just the 2 of them and their immediate family. They were too old now for big parties, content instead with a simple meal and the company of those they loved most. Their children gave speeches about what wonderful parents and role models Adelaide and Isaac had been, about the love and stability they had provided, about the example they had set for what a real marriage looked like. "You showed us how to love," Thomas said, his own hair now streaked with gray, his children grown with families of their own. "Not just in words, but in actions. Every day we watched you choose each other, support each other, lift each other up. That is what we have tried to do in our own marriages, and it is what we have taught our children. Your legacy is not just this ranch or even this family. It is the love you have shared and the example you have set. That will echo through generations." Adelaide cried hearing her son's words, and Isaac squeezed her hand, his own eyes damp with emotion. They had tried their best, had stumbled sometimes, but always found their way back to each other. To know that their children had seen that, had learned from it, had carried it forward into their own lives was more rewarding than anything else could have been. The evening ended early, as was common now that Adelaide and Isaac tired more easily, and they retired to their room as the sun was still setting. Isaac helped Adelaide change into her nightgown, and she helped him with his own night clothes, and they climbed into bed together just as they had done thousands of times before. 55 years, Adelaide mused, nestled against Isaac's chest. How did we get so lucky? I do not think it was luck, Isaac said, running his fingers through her still thick hair, now completely white. I think it was choice. We chose each other and we kept choosing each other every single day. That is what made the difference. You are right, Adelaide agreed. Though I still think there was a bit of luck involved. Lucky that you rode down that trail at exactly the right moment. Lucky that you were the kind of man who would stop to help. Lucky that we both recognized what we had found in each other. I will give you that, Isaac conceded. Though I prefer to think of it as fate rather than luck. Like we were always meant to find each other, and the universe just had to arrange the circumstances to make it happen. Fate, luck, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, I am grateful, Adelaide said, for all of it. For every moment we have had together. Me too, Isaac said softly. Me too. They drifted off to sleep, the sleep of the aged and content, knowing they had lived fully and loved deeply, knowing they had built something that would outlast them both. Adelaide and Isaac lived several more years, watching their great-grandchildren grow, seeing the ranch continue to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren. They grew frailer as time passed, their world gradually shrinking to the house and the porch, but they never lost their connection to each other or their joy in being together. When Isaac was 80, he suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. Adelaide nursed him with the same dedication and love she had shown him throughout their marriage, refusing to let anyone else take over his care. She bathed him and dressed him, helped him eat and move, sat with him for hours reading aloud or just holding his hand. The doctors said he might not survive, but Adelaide would not accept that. She talked to him constantly, reminding him of all the reasons he had to fight, all the people who loved him and needed him, and Isaac did fight. Slowly, painfully, he recovered some of his mobility and much of his speech. He would never be the strong, capable man he had once been, but he was still Isaac, still the man Adelaide loved with every fiber of her being. And she was grateful for every single day they had together, no matter how limited his abilities or how much care he required. I am sorry, Isaac said one afternoon, his speech still slightly slurred but understandable. Sorry I am such a burden now. Do not ever say that, Adelaide said fiercely, gripping his hand. You are not a burden. You are my husband, my love, my whole heart. Taking care of you is not a burden. It is a privilege, do you understand? A privilege. Isaac's eyes filled with tears and Adelaide leaned forward to kiss him gently. We have taken care of each other our whole lives, she continued. When I was pregnant and sick, you took care of me. When my father died, you held me together. When I broke my leg trying to break that wild horse, you nursed me back to health. This is just what we do, Isaac. We take care of each other. That is what love is. I love you, Isaac said, the words clear and strong despite his impairment. Always have, always will. I love you too, Adelaide replied, until the end of time and beyond. Isaac lived another 3 years after the stroke, years filled with both challenges and joys. He was there to meet 2 more great-grandchildren, to celebrate Adelaide's 80th birthday, to mark their 58th wedding anniversary. His body was failing, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Adelaide never wavered. On a warm summer evening, surrounded by his family, Isaac Dalton passed away peacefully in his sleep with Adelaide holding his hand. The grief Adelaide felt was overwhelming, a physical pain that seemed to tear her apart from the inside. She had lost half of herself, the other part of her soul, and she did not know how she was supposed to go on without him. But she did go on because that was what Isaac would have wanted. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, taking comfort in the family they had built together. She told stories about Isaac, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him in his prime. She visited his grave every day, sitting beside the headstone and talking to him as if he were still there, telling him about what was happening on the ranch, about how much she missed him, about how much she still loved him. Adelaide lived for 2 more years without Isaac, and while there were moments of happiness and joy, there was always an underlying sadness, a sense of incompleteness without him by her side. She knew she was lucky to have had him for as long as she did, knew that 58 years of marriage was more than many people ever got, but it still did not feel like enough. She wanted more time, more moments, more memories to add to the treasure trove she already had. On a beautiful spring morning, 2 years to the day after Isaac's death, Adelaide passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, a serene expression on her face and a slight smile playing at her lips, as if she had seen something wonderful in those last moments. On her nightstand was an old photograph from their wedding day. Adelaide in her handmade lace dress and Isaac in his best suit, both of them young and radiant with joy and love. Adelaide was buried next to Isaac in the small cemetery on the ranch, beneath an oak tree they had planted together in their early years. The headstones were simple but elegant, with their names and dates and a single line beneath each. Isaac's read, "Beloved husband, father, and friend." He saved her life and won her heart. Adelaide's read, "Beloved wife, mother, and friend." She was his heart from mud to forever. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over California to pay their respects. Adelaide and Isaac had touched so many lives over the years, had been pillars of their community, had built something that would last for generations. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood together, united in their grief, but also in their gratitude for the example Adelaide and Isaac had set. Thomas stood at his mother's graveside and told the story one last time, the story of how his parents had met. He told it the way Adelaide had told it so many times, with all the details about the mud and the rescue and the instant connection. He told it with love and reverence, and when he finished, there was not a dry eye among the mourners. "My parents showed us what real love looks like," Thomas concluded. "Not the fairy tale kind that is always perfect and easy, but the real kind that takes work and commitment and choosing each other every single day. They built a life together that was rich and full and meaningful. They raised us with love and taught us by example how to be good people, good spouses, good parents. Their legacy is not just this ranch or even just this family. It is the love they shared and the lessons they taught and the example they set, and that will live on forever." The years passed, and the ranch continued to thrive under the management of Adelaide and Isaac's descendants. The story of how Adelaide and Isaac met, of the mud pit and the cowboy who pulled her free and carried her to dry ground, became a family legend, told and retold with each new generation. It became a reminder of how love could spring from the most unexpected circumstances, how a single moment could change the course of a life, how choosing someone and being chosen in return was the greatest gift any person could receive. The house Adelaide and Isaac had built was preserved and maintained, becoming a cherished family gathering place where reunions were held and stories were shared. The rocking chairs they had sat in during their final years remained on the porch, and sometimes family members would sit there and look out over the ranch and feel the presence of Adelaide and Isaac, as if they were still there watching over everything they had created. And in a way, they were still there. They were there in every horse that was gentled with patience and respect, in every business decision that was made with integrity, in every marriage that was built on partnership and mutual love, in every child that was raised with kindness and taught to value people over possessions. Adelaide and Isaac's love had created ripples that spread outward through time, touching lives they would never know, influencing generations they would never meet. Their story became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the power of love and commitment, to the beauty of choosing someone and being faithful to that choice through all the ups and downs that life brings. It became proof that happily ever after is not a destination but a journey, not a single moment but thousands of moments strung together over a lifetime. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, that being rescued can lead to love, and that building something lasting is worth every sacrifice and every struggle along the way. In the end, Adelaide and Isaac got there happily ever after. Not because their life was perfect, or because they never faced hardships or challenges. They got it because they faced those challenges together, because they chose each other over and over again, because their love was strong enough to weather every storm. They got it because they built something beautiful together, something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes and would continue to impact the world long after they were gone. Their love story started in the mud, with a cowboy pulling a woman free and carrying her to dry ground. But it became so much more than that simple beginning. It became a love that transformed two individual lives into one shared journey. It became a partnership that built a legacy of family and values and enduring love. It became proof that sometimes fate puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it feels like the worst possible moment, because that is where you will find the person who will change your life forever. And if Adelaide and Isaac could have seen the future, could have known how their story would be remembered and cherished and passed down through generations, they would have been humbled and grateful and deeply moved. But most of all, they would have been happy, because what they wanted more than anything was to build something that mattered, to love deeply and be loved in return, to create a family and a life that would outlast them. And that is exactly what they did. Starting from the moment a cowboy pulled a woman from the mud and carried her to safety, starting from that single moment of connection and kindness that blossomed into a love story for the ages.